Have you ever wondered if you've truly broken free from a toxic relationship? Not just walked away physically, but fully liberated your mind, reclaiming your emotional power and erasing the scars left by manipulation? Because when it comes to relationships with narcissists, you're not just leaving a person, you're dismantling an entire web of deception, false narratives woven so deeply into your identity that they make you doubt yourself and forget your true worth. In today's video, we'll embark on a powerful journey together, a journey that not only helps you recognize the manipulation hidden in every word, every action of the narcissist, but also equips you with the strength to rebuild yourself from within. This is a journey toward reclaiming your inner peace, that sacred space they tried so hard to steal from you, and the very thing that terrifies them most when you finally embrace it. If you've ever felt swept into the emotional whirlwind of a narcissist, ensnared by their sweet lies or their cold, punishing silence, then this video is for you. Stay with me until the end, because I believe what you're about to hear could be the turning point where you realize that true freedom has always been within your grasp. And if this message resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the deeper insights to come. Together, let's expose the truth, reclaim our strength, and step forward into a freedom that cannot be shaken. There's a quiet question that lingers in the minds of many who have endured toxic relationships. How do I know if I've truly broken free? Not just physically walked away, but stripped away the invisible chains that still bind the mind. Because with the narcissist, their aim isn't merely to control your actions, it's to dominate your perception, your emotions, and the deepest layers of your identity. They distort your reality, make you question your own memories, and twist the image you see every time you look in the mirror. But what happens when the emotional storms they once unleashed no longer shake you? When your peace is no longer a bargaining chip, but a sacred boundary that cannot be breached? That is an avoidance. That is the mark of rebirth. And in today's video, we'll dive deep into the powerful signs that reveal you've truly escaped the insidious grip of a narcissist. Not just to understand them, but to affirm your strength, your victory. This is the journey of rebuilding yourself into someone unshakable, grounded, and free. If you feel like you're somewhere along that path, or even if you simply want to understand yourself more deeply, stay with me through this video. I believe what we uncover today will shine a light on your journey and remind you that your freedom is real and within reach. And if you find value in this video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you can continue this journey with me, exposing manipulation and nurturing your inner freedom. Now, let's begin. There's one thing narcissists excel at. They don't just manipulate your actions. They infiltrate the very core of your perception, distorting your reality piece by piece. They don't just spread false narratives about you to others. They make you question your own memories, emotions, and worth. They plant seeds of doubt deep within until a voice inside your head no longer feels like your own, but starts to echo with their tone. A voice that makes you wonder, am I wrong? Do I deserve this treatment? And this is the heart of the psychological game the narcissist plays. They create an environment of chaos, a storm of emotions, where you're constantly swept into cycles of arguments, blame, and hollow apologies, laced with conditions. You're given no space to pause, no room to recognize that everything around you is a maze designed to keep you lost. In that maze, chaos is their weapon, and your stability is the target they aim to destroy. But then something shifts, a small moment, a flicker of clarity, when you begin to see the truth. Not all at once, not with a roar of thunder, but in the quiet. A moment when you realize you're no longer reacting the way you once did. They might say the same words that used to cut you to your core, might attempt to manipulate you like they always have, but your heart no longer follows. The storm still rages outside, but within you, there's a calm space they can no longer reach. That peace isn't numbness or indifference, on the contrary, it's strength. It's the ability to stand firm in the midst of the storm, not because you've run away from it, but because you've rebuilt your inner framework stronger, more resilient. When they can no longer shake you, when they can't make you doubt yourself or lose your direction, that's when you know you've truly broken free from the invisible chains they once wrapped around you. You no longer feel the need to keep the peace by accepting what should never be accepted. You no longer feel compelled to please them just to avoid another argument or another punishing silence, because you've come to understand that true peace doesn't come from quieting the storms they create. It comes from knowing that their storm holds no power over you anymore. When you reach that moment, that sacred point where their chaos no longer stirs your mind the way it once did, you begin to realize something even deeper. You no longer need closure from them. This is one of the hardest truths to accept after leaving a relationship with a narcissist. Because deep down, there's still a part of you that craves an explanation, an apology, or at least some acknowledgement that what you went through is real. You long for them to see your pain, to recognize the hurt they caused, and you believe that if they would just for once speak the truth, maybe, just maybe, it would bring you peace. But here's the reality. That moment will never come, because to give you true closure, they would need to possess self-reflection, compassion, and accountability for their actions. All things that narcissists rarely, if ever, have. They don't see the world the way you do. They don't feel hurt the way you feel it. They constantly rewrite the story in their mind to protect their fragile ego, shielding themselves from guilt or shame. And so, waiting for their acknowledgement is like thirsting in a desert for relief that will never arrive. And it is precisely when you release that longing, when you stop demanding closure from them, that you grant yourself true freedom. You come to understand that closure does not come from anyone else. It comes from within, from your ability to face the truth, however painful, that the love you gave was real, that the pain you endured was real, and that your healing does not depend on any apology. When you stop seeking closure, you also strip them of the power to control your story. You take back the pen. You write the next chapter of your life without needing their permission. That is a powerful transformation. The truth is, what you truly need isn't closure from them. It's clarity. Clarity about yourself, about what you've been through, and about your true worth. And that clarity will never come from someone who worked so hard to distort your reality. It comes from your ability to stand tall, to look back on everything and to say, I see the truth. And I choose to move forward. And you know what? That release, that moment when you no longer need anything from them is what terrifies the narcissist the most. Because when they no longer have the power to shake you, to stir your hope, to drag you back into their emotional whirlpool, they lose their most precious source of supply. And in that moment, you are truly free. Do you know why closure becomes one of the most insidious chains a narcissist uses to keep you trapped? Because closure isn't just some psychological concept, it's a primal human need. The need for completion, for understanding the full arc of a story. Narcissists know this. They understand this basic instinct in you, and they exploit it, turning it into an endless path where you keep chasing the shadow of validation while they keep that door slightly ajar, just enough to fuel your hope, but never enough for you to step through. At this point, the battle is no longer between you and them. It becomes a battle between you and your own need for acknowledgement. That need isn't wrong. It's part of being human. But when you place that need in the hands of someone who cannot and will not fulfill it, you trap yourself in a prison of your own making. The narcissist doesn't have to do anything more. They simply let you starve spiritually. They let you thirst in an emotional desert, always waiting for a drop of water from someone who never intended to give. And here lies the cruelty. They know this. They know that the longer they keep you waiting, the longer they keep you hoping, the more vulnerable you become to their manipulation. Because in that state of yearning, you begin to accept things you never would have tolerated before. A glance, a fleeting message, a vague gesture of care. All of it becomes proof in your mind that they're still there, that closure might still come, but in truth, it's just feeding the cycle of emotional addiction, a loop you don't even realize you're caught in. To break this cycle requires a rare kind of courage, the courage to accept that closure from them will never come. Not because you don't deserve it, but because they're simply incapable of giving it. That is a harsh but liberating truth. Narcissists lack one essential element, the ability to self-reflect. They cannot face themselves, their wounds, their mistakes, or even your existence outside of the role you played as their emotional supply. And for that reason, closure can never come from someone who doesn't possess a mirror to look into their own soul. It has to come from you, from the acceptance that you are the only one who can close that chapter, without anyone else holding the pen. It's that moment when you stop scrolling through old messages. Stop wondering, if I had said it differently, would they have understood? You stop crafting imaginary dialogues in your mind, those final conversations where everything would finally make sense. You realize that clarity has always been in your hands. The only thing missing was the courage to believe in it. When you no longer need their validation to confirm that what you experienced was real, you no longer need their presence to feel your own worth. And this is the ultimate blow to the narcissist's ego, because their true power has never been in what they did, but in how they made you doubt yourself. When you stand firm in your truth, every emotional lever they once used becomes useless. They may try to return using the same old tactics, a belated apology, a vague message, a glance filled with feigned regret. But this time, it doesn't work. Not because you've become hard or cold, but because you are clear. Clear about what you deserve. Clear about who is truly capable of offering real love. And clear that your peace is no longer a bargaining chip in their power game. It is your untouchable right. This is not an easy process. It doesn't happen overnight. It comes after long nights of questioning yourself. After tense moments when you almost reach out to them again, searching for that sliver of hope, whispering, maybe this time will be different. But each time you pause, each time you turn back toward yourself, you lay another brick in the foundation of something new, a foundation that no one else can shake. And then, when closure is no longer something you seek, when you stand firm in your own clarity, a quiet yet powerful weapon begins to emerge. But let me be clear, this is the kind of silence used to punish or manipulate the narcissist. It's not silence fueled by anger or resentment, waiting for someone to come soothe it. No, this is the silence of awareness, a steady, unwavering silence that shakes the very structure the narcissist has built. But you see, to a narcissist, emotions are currency. Any reaction, whether love, anger, pain, or hope, feeds them. For them, your tearful pleas holds as much value as your angry outbursts, because both prove one thing: they still have control over your mind. But when you go silent, truly silent, not to see how they'll respond, but because you genuinely have nothing left to say, nothing left to give, that creates a void they cannot tolerate. To a narcissist, that silence isn't a pause. It's a hollow emptiness where they no longer see themselves reflected in your eyes. And for an ego as fragile as theirs, that feels like collapse. You don't need to shout, "I see you for who you really are." You don't need to make any grand declaration. Your absence is the clearest statement of all. And the narcissist feels that more deeply than any words you could ever speak. Why do they fear your silence so much? Because it proves they no longer control your emotions. They can try every familiar tactic, the sweet promises, the cold threats, the victim act, the sudden burst of affection, but it all falls into the void. The arrows they shoot no longer find their mark because you are no longer standing on that battlefield. And here's what's important. This silence isn't cold or cruel. It doesn't come from hatred. It comes from emotional maturity, from the realization that you no longer need to play the game. You don't need to explain, justify, or try to make them understand, because you understand the truth. This silence is a wordless refusal, the strongest boundary you've ever set. It's an unspoken declaration that your mind, your heart, and your soul are no longer their playground. And then you'll notice something strange. You're no longer angry. That feeling begins to fade, making space for something else. A kind of emptiness, but a healthy emptiness. A space where you're no longer bound by false expectations or nameless pain. You no longer feel the need to win this battle because you've left the battlefield entirely. And at that moment, the narcissist will feel the true end. Not through a fiery argument or a dramatic confrontation, but through your complete absence from the emotional universe they once controlled. That is your final victory, a silent but profoundly powerful triumph. Silence, in this context, is not merely the absence of sound or words. It is a solid psychological structure, a mental fortress that the narcissist cannot penetrate, and that, more than anything, triggers their internal crisis. Because for a narcissist, power doesn't lie in being loved or hated, it lies in provoking a reaction. They live and feed off your emotional responses, whether it's praise, criticism, sorrow, or rage. All of it fuels their hollow sense of self. But when you go silent, a silence that cannot be manipulated or broken, you're not just refusing to engage in conversation, you're refusing to participate in the reality they've constructed. a reality sustained by a two-person game, one who manipulates and one who reacts. When you stop reacting, the game ends. But rather than acknowledge that, the narcissist does the only thing they know. They escalate. They escalate by throwing every familiar tactic at you, sweet words laced with threats, playing the victim one moment, flipping to the accuser the next. They'll reach for the weak spots that once made you crumble. They'll bring up cherished memories, stir feelings of guilt or feign remorse. But none of this is about love or genuine change. It's because they cannot tolerate the fact that you stepped outside of their orbit. Remember this, a narcissist doesn't need to love you to want to control you. What they crave is power, the ability to shape your experience. When you remain silent, you deny them the ability to shape your emotions, your thoughts, your memories. You refuse the role of the puppet in the play they're directing. And that creates a kind of ego crisis within the narcissist, a confrontation with their own lack of control. Psychologically, this reaction mirrors a form of emotional power withdrawal syndrome. The narcissist has grown accustomed to receiving their daily dose of control over your emotions. When you cut off that supply, they spiral into a state of restlessness, confusion, and disorientation. This explains why they may escalate wildly up, swinging from desperate pleas for forgiveness to threats of destruction. But beneath all these behaviors, no matter how powerful they might appear on the surface, lies a deep-rooted fear of losing control. Understand this. Narcissists don't manipulate simply to control others. They manipulate to avoid facing themselves. When you go silent, you force them to confront what they've spent their entire life running from. Their inner emptiness, their inability to control others, and the devastating truth that they no longer matter to you. And that, right there, is the narcissist's fatal blow. The realization that no matter what they do, they can no longer occupy space in your mind. No more questioning, was I wrong? No more sleepless nights replaying every word. No more wondering, should I text them back? Your silence is the end of all emotional transactions between you and them, but this silence is not avoidance. It is the ultimate expression of psychological autonomy. You are not silent out of fear, but because you have nothing left to prove, nothing left to fix, and most importantly, nothing left to give them. And so, after all their escalations, after all their performances, whether as victim, savior, or even enemy, the narcissist eventually hits a limit they never anticipated. You no longer respond. And this is when their ego collapse becomes undeniable. They cannot comprehend why the tactics that once wounded you, that once threw you into self-doubt, now fall completely flat. And this drives them into an internal loss of control, a nightmare they cannot endure. You don't need to retaliate. You don't need sharp words. Your calm, steady presence is the greatest challenge they will ever face. Because to a narcissist, your silence is not just the absence of words, it is the denial of their existence in your emotional world. In that moment, they are forced to confront something they've spent their entire life avoiding, their own insignificance, their invisibility in the mind of another. They cannot bear the thought that you have built an independent value system, an inner framework no longer swayed by their familiar emotional levers. And here lies the crucial point. The narcissist doesn't need your love, they need power over you. When that power is gone, their sense of identity collapses. From a psychological perspective, this is a temporary breakdown of the narcissistic defense mechanism. The narcissist constructs their sense of self around fragile defenses, layers of superiority, perfection, or victimhood. But when no one participates in their script, when no one reflects back the image they've crafted, their true self, a hollow, fragile ego begins to emerge, and that terrifies them. They fear your silence, not because they've lost you, but because they've lost control over the narrative. They can no longer write the next chapters of your story, can no longer position themselves at the center, can no longer dictate how you feel. That silence, that calm, stands as proof of one undeniable truth. You've left the game. But what's remarkable is that this piece wasn't handed to you. It's something you've built, brick by brick, day by day, each time you refused to engage in the old emotional cycle. Every time you didn't respond to a provocative message, every time you didn't justify your feelings, every time you chose silence over being pulled into another argument, you reinforced the foundation of a new identity, an identity no longer shaped by their control, but by your own hands. And then gradually you begin to realize that this peace isn't fragile or fleeting. It is a resilient inner ecosystem, a space where your emotions are heard but not manipulated, where your self-worth is no longer tied to someone else's gaze, where you have nothing to prove in order to be seen or validated. The narcissist will try to return, they always try to return a vague message and offer to talk things through one last time. A performance of I've changed. But this time you see the game clearly. You don't need to be angry or argue. You simply aren't there anymore. You're standing in a place they cannot reach, not because you've built towering walls, but because you've laid a solid foundation within yourself. And then you'll see true power doesn't lie in defeating them. It lies in no longer needing them at all. No need for an apology. No need for recognition. No need for them to understand, because you understand you are enough. You are free. When you stepped outside of the narcissist sphere of control, when silence and calm become the bedrock of your inner life, a new journey truly begins. The journey of rebuilding your identity. This isn't just about healing old wounds. It's about reconstructing yourself from the ground up, completely untethered from the distorted definitions the narcissist once imposed on you. Because remember this, in a relationship with a narcissist, you weren't just a victim of manipulation. You were stripped of your right to define yourself. They reshaped how you viewed your worth, gradually forcing you to live within the confines of their expectations and needs. They planted seeds of doubt in your mind, telling you your love was too much, your emotions were weakness, your boundaries were selfish. And then when you break free, you find yourself standing in an unfamiliar void, not as someone untouched by pain, but as someone whose identity's been distorted, manipulated to the point where you're no longer sure who you really are. This is where the real work begins. Rediscovering yourself, redefining who you are when no one is pulling the strings, when no one is demanding that you bend to fit their mold. Psychologically, this is the process of reintegration of identity, a journey that isn't easy, but is profoundly liberating. It requires you to face the emptiness left behind by the narcissist, the space that was once filled with arguments, false hopes, and desperate attempts to fix something you never had the power to control. And within that space, you learn how to listen to yourself. For the first time in years, you can ask yourself questions that were never asked before. What do I truly need to feel at peace? What do I genuinely value in a relationship? Do I have the right to say no without feeling guilty? These are not theoretical questions. They are the pillars upon which you rebuild yourself, piece by piece. And each time you answer one of them, no matter how small the answer may seem, you reclaim a part of the identity that was once stripped away. Your silence is no longer a weapon against the narcissist. It becomes a space where you can finally listen to yourself. In that space, you begin to discern more clearly which feelings are truly yours and which were imposed upon you. You recognize that the anxiety, the moments of self-doubt, all of these are remnants of prolonged manipulation, and instead of blaming yourself for having these feelings, you learn to face them, to embrace them as part of your healing journey. At this stage, the most important thing is not to strive to return to the version of yourself from before the narcissist. You will never be that person again. But that's not a loss. It's an evolution. You're not going back to who you were. You're becoming someone stronger, clearer, and far less susceptible to manipulation. And from that foundation, you begin to establish new boundaries, not walls built from fear, but firm lines drawn from a deep understanding of who you are. You no longer need to shout to be respected. You don't have to argue to defend your feelings. Your solid presence is the boundary. And this is what makes the narcissist and anyone else who might seek to manipulate you take notice. You are no longer easily pulled into emotional games. You can spot the signs of manipulation from the very first steps. A controlling question, a criticism disguised as honest feedback, a subtle test of your limits. And instead of reacting defensively or anxiously, you simply stand firm. And then as you reach the end of this journey, looking back on all that you've endured, the emotional cycles, the moments of self-doubt, you realize that true strength never came from confronting or arguing with the narcissist. It came from your ability to walk away in silence, holding onto a peace they could never touch. The narcissist once stood at the center of your emotional universe. They manipulated, they shaped, they planted seeds of doubt about your worth, keeping you trapped in a constant state of seeking validation from someone who never intended to give it. But now, you've stepped outside of that spiral. The greatest victory isn't that you out-argue them, is that you no longer play the game at all. You don't need closure from them. You don't need their apology or acknowledgement to feel whole. You have given yourself the closure. and that is the ultimate freedom. The silence you hold is not avoidance. It is an unspoken declaration of inner strength. It proclaims that you know your worth, that you no longer allow others to define you through their emotional instability. And this is what terrifies the narcissist most of all. They no longer hold power over your mind. But remember, this journey isn't just about breaking free from control. It's about rebuilding your identity. You learn how to listen to yourself again, to reconstruct your boundaries, and to ask the essential questions. Who am I when I'm no longer being manipulated? How do I want to live my life, and by what values? And from those questions, you begin to lay a new foundation, a value system no longer easily shaken by familiar tactics. You become a steadier version of yourself, no longer needing to prove or justify your feelings. Your grounded presence becomes your strongest boundary. So if today's message has awakened a part of that strength within you, if it's helped you realize that you are not alone on this journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and follow the channel. There is so much more we will explore together. Deep psychological insights, powerful strategies to help you nurture your inner freedom and rebuild your life in the way you deserve. Because true freedom doesn't come from the outside. It begins within you.